Okay, again, I'm Kristina Payne. I'm the Executive Director of Lane Workforce Partnership. That's the workforce board in Eugene, Oregon. We cover an area that's broadly the size of the state of Connecticut. However, they have around 3.7 million people, and we have about 370,000 people. I know we're going to talk about how we got these started, so I'll just be brief with this. And right now we have a tech collaborative, we have food and beverage manufacturing, a construction ag group, and maritime, and I'm missing one, so I'm going to hand this off.
You'll think of it, that always happens. I'm Meagan, Lannan. I work for the state of Montana as a workforce strategist, as we mentioned earlier. In the beginning, with partnerships, I worked a lot with Katie in my previous position, and I was a manager of a local workforce center there. And so we sort of happened upon all this together, and I currently empowering and supporting, I wouldn't say I'm actually convening it, but an IT partnership with a colleague of mine, Hassan Burbridge, who's also here today, in Billings, and then a retail partnership in Great Falls, and some stuff bubbling in eastern Montana, but they haven't quite determined what they're going to do yet. So.
Hi, I'm Katie Weaver. I'm a county extension agent. I do economic development in the other Park County on the other side of the mountains. There's about 15,000 folks in Park County, and half of those are in the city of Livingston, the county seat. Meagan and I, up until about a year ago, co-convened the Gallatin Valley Manufacturing Partnership, and that was the outgrowth of some work from the Next Gen team on a large grant the state of Montana had around manufacturing. Francie Gens had done some work in getting some partnerships up and going, and as they were transitioning out, that's when Meagan and I stepped in and co-convened. And then about a year and a half ago, launched a partnership in Gardner, which is a community of 800 people. Most of you probably know it's the north entrance to Yellowstone Park. They have about 800,000 folks go through that community every year.
Right. So Kristina, I have heard you before talk a little bit about your aha moment when because you are a director of a big workforce board center. Tell us about your aha moment when you decided sector partnerships were different than what you've done in the past, and then how you started the very first one and how you got it off the ground.
Sure, so a little over 4 years ago, I went from being the workforce investment manager, handling the investments that came into our community, creating partnerships, and primarily leading a sector strategy around with our healthcare sector. Had done that for 13 years, and then became the executive director of the board. The new law had come into place. We were being asked to expand our region, which I already told you, it was, in our opinion, was big enough. And then the state came to us and said, we want you guys to do sector strategy work. And I just felt like on top of everything, here we'd already been doing sector strategy work, and they were going to help us do sector strategy work. And I thought, well, isn't this grand? That on top of everything that we're doing now, we're going to do this again, and it's going to be bigger and better. And I was also taking my organization out of a county department and setting it up as a nonprofit. So just a little bit of stuff going on. Anyway, so Lindsay and John, we talked on the phone a few times, and they talked about, we did kind of the exercise over the phone that you just did, where we talked about who's all involved, who's doing all the asks. And they said, I want you to invite all of those entities to our training. And I said, okay, fine, we'll see if they show up. And they did, because they thought, that we were going to do something that they wouldn't be involved in. And so they were there. And as we went through this training, I was there, and I really felt like I had been doing sector strategy work, and I had I had been working with the healthcare industry, like I said, for 13 years. We had done some phenomenal work with the hospitals and long-term care facilities. We'd expanded training programs, brought in distance learning. And so as we went through our day-long session with John and Lindsay, they talked about convening the industry and asking this big question: what's standing between your industry and your ability to grow or sustain or thrive in this community? And I looked at them and I thought, well, I'm workforce development. I can't solve all their problems. Why would I ask a question that I don't have all the answers to? And Lindsay looked at me and said, it's not for you to solve by yourself. You have all these other entities here, and they can solve these problems. And so that was my aha moment. I realized, okay, I can ask this question. We have a lot of different partners that can solve these problems. We can convene the industry, and as we did and came up with a game plan, some of the things on that plan were things, we started with tech, and things like high-speed internet and a flight to San Jose is what the industry wanted. I never would have asked this question before. This would not have been something that I could have solved by myself. And because of the different partners that were in the room, hearing that this is what the industry asked for, sitting around a table, not all leading the conversations, not saying, oh wait, we already did that or we're already working on that, but to really listen and then take that information back to our airport, to our city officials. We now have high-speed internet that costs $99 a month in our downtown area that's going to be expanded out to, it's already starting to be expanded to rural parts of our community. And we have a flight to San Jose. So those are just a couple of things I just want to say, that this really does work. I was that person that was sitting there who said, I've done this work before, I know how to do this work. And while I know my lane and I know how to work in workforce development, had I stayed in my lane and if we had just trained people to become coders for the tech industry, if they didn't have high-speed internet and if they didn't have a flight to San Jose, by the time we got all the coders trained, they would have been gone. So maybe that's an aha moment for others as well.
Okay, Katie, you started rural partnerships, and I know it takes special work in rural areas. So will you share with us how you got this started?
Sure. You know, when Meagan and I first connected with the Next Gen team, it very much was like an aha, like, yes, our people exist out there. You know, I used to do economic development in a very traditional organization, which is in Montana. It's very turfy. There's a lot of egos. It's highly competitive. And when I moved into Extension and continued to do that work, we really, if you're familiar with Extension folks, it's based on community needs, which is really aligned with this approach. So working in Park County, we have really about 5 different communities, and all of them are highly rural. Outside of Livingston, they're all 800. I think Livingston is the 11th or 12th largest community in the state, so it's rural, but you know, on the grand spectrum, it's kind of there in the middle. So after doing some work over in the Bozeman area and kind of looking back at our community and thinking, okay, where does this make sense? Where's the greatest need? You know, the kind of jobs you want to grow aren't necessarily in the tourism industry. But when you're in a county like ours, our top industry far and away is tourism and is agriculture. So community readiness is what really an industry, and I use those interchangeably because in Gardner, the community and the industry are interchangeable. the folks who run those businesses coach the basketball teams, they sit on the resort tax board, their parents, they wear multiple hats within the community. And Gardner just had a large successful project under its belt and really had some strong local leadership and had some experience on how to work together in a collaborative manner. So that's kind of how we made the decision to let's go have some conversations with some industry leaders in that community. And they were calling us. The phone was ringing off the hook. We don't know how to find enough employees. We need people. We need bodies. When you have 800,000 folks come through your little community, workforce is a big challenge. And so went down, had just kind of an informational meeting, and by the time we left there was 8 folks committed to the launch within about a month, and moving forward with that. And 21 businesses showed up to that launch, and everywhere from a sole proprietor guide in the park to Xanterra, which employs over 2,500 people seasonally. So that, I think that readiness, and we're going to spend some time on that, is just really critical. And that leadership within the industry, they really need to be ready to step forward.
Great. So Meagan, you work with several partnerships across your state. Can you tell us what makes some of those successful and what doesn't work as well?
I think Katie really hit on that when she was talking about Gardner. Leadership and readiness. Readiness in terms of being able to share and moving their community forward. I think also that ego in our business as workforce, economic, and education, we all have, an agenda that we're trying to meet. And I think in those ready communities, we've come across I think one brain is just not enough. And I'll say, Katie and I both started our positions just in Livingston right about the same time. And I quickly realized in workforce development, I don't have all the answers. So if there's someone I can hook up with that can figure out how to get the community further, or actually probably knows more than I do, I'm totally down with that. But I think that looking across the state, I realized the communities are the same in that manner. There's always a few leaders, there's always a few people willing to chip in, and it just really takes that, what we always say, that coalition of the willing to really get moving and to set aside their egos, their agendas, and listen.
So I've got a few questions from the audience, and I'm going to just throw this out in whichever of you wants to answer. What's the hardest part of starting a sector partnership?
I think capacity is always a challenge, both on the industry side and the support partners. I have the ability, in my position, I have some freedom in how I do my work, and so when I have 21 businesses show up, that very quickly becomes a priority, and I make the time to have the capacity to support that. Not all communities have that, and not only that capacity, but the capacity that understands that this is different and why it's important that it's different, and to protect that space if needed. We haven't experienced it in Park County, but on the Gallatin side, there's been some hackles raised by folks who see an industry-driven effort as a threat, and have stated that. And so, not only the capacity to really be there and support, and to kind of support their capacity and leadership development as industry, but to potentially protect that space if needed.
Okay, I've got several here who want to know, if you can't get those industry partners to share, what do you do? What if they won't participate? You have key industry folks who won't participate. Have any of you had that experience, and how did you handle it?
Yes, we have had that experience. You know what? they're gonna join up at some time. It always happens. I have seen it in several different states. I've heard it from other people in different states. I've seen it. When wheels are turning and things are moving, and action is key, and that's another thing about Next Gen. I feel like there's a lot of proof in the pudding, and when people start seeing action and it's not just another meeting, because we've conditioned businesses to be like, just come to another meeting, whee! But once this really starts to get going and there's action, they get there. They really do.
How do you work with multiple industries within the Next Gen?
Since I forgot my fifth one, apparently. Well, you know, once you've started and kicked off, I think you have a model then that you can replicate. You finally have that path, and you can see where you came from and where you ended up, and you can then backtrack and start all over again. And I would say having a business champion with each industry startup is key. I will probably repeat this with my team. If you want to get business engagement, you need business leading this at the forefront. This really is different. It's not about a government entity or the workforce board or the chamber saying, we are going to do this for you. It is about the industry saying, these are our needs and they're here to help us get this work done. And then we have to demonstrate that we're going to get things done. And I think by getting things done, to Meagan's point, that's where the naysayers, the ones who were convened over and over again, and we're told, come to this meeting, we're going to talk to industry, things are going to happen, and they thought, you know, I came to those meetings and nothing happened. Or someone wrote a paper and we don't know where that went. When you stop writing about it and start doing it, just getting out there and finding the other smart people, the other brains that can make this stuff happen, and getting behind them, things start happening, and then they come on board.
Kristina, while you have the mic, there are a few people who want to hear more detail about the flight. How you got the flight.
How did you get a flight? Well, I'm going to tell you, I wasn't the brains behind that. I will say our chamber worked with our city. The tipping point was the conversations had been percolating for a long time. There's things that are happening in your communities right now. Once we convened the industry and we made it amongst every economic development entity, the cities, the chambers, everyone in our region knew this was a top priority of industry. It wasn't just one of us carrying this conversation around, which had happened, and it was circular year after year after year. When we all knew this was a top priority, then they had the strength and the numbers and the names to put down, these are the companies, this is the ridership, this is who said that they'll do it. They said, you said this, we need it down on paper, took it to Alaska Airlines, and that's how we got the flight. Just to have the conversations for years after years, having people go and say, no, we promise there'll be people in those seats. That's not enough to get an airlines to put a flight in place. They needed the names. And people had said, oh, well, that conversation had been talked about for years. I can guarantee you we would still be talking about it today if we hadn't had this organized way of working with industry. There would still be conversations around, gee, we wish we had. And our airport has expanded. They reported their highest numbers of ridership last year. So it's making a difference in our community.
So one of the questions was about CTE programming. And Meagan could probably speak to this. How are there new innovative things that have come out in career and tech ed as a result of the industry sector partnerships? While you're thinking, I'm just going to jump in and say, with our Northern Colorado manufacturing partnership, and Dave will speak to this, I'm sure. We have developed a region-wide advisory team meeting. So all of you from how many from community colleges in the room? Okay. All of you who have CTE programs are required to have an advisory team for your CTE program, if you get Perkins funding, right? What we have done is combine that. So once a year, we have a combined industry advisory team meeting. And this last one had about 30 manufacturers and 65 educators in the room. And in a couple hours, we talked about work-based learning and getting to some issues where we had everybody at the table rather than what Lindsay was talking about, that little sliver of 2 or 3 manufacturers telling you what they need. And the person who brings this together is Dave. So he's the industry person and he brings it together, not the educators. They just come to the table. So Meagan.
As far as CTE, currently right now I'm leading a work-based learning facilitator project in the high school, and we've been able to even drill it down just to the secondary level, which has been great. And so I think we're, in my world, moving mountains with CTE on that level, and then also CTE on the post-secondary level has decided to make work-based learning their priority as well. So we're really starting to have some serious conversations about what that looks like, but also at the same time, I'm running PACE on some partnership stuff, like we mentioned earlier, and trying to get the CTE folks to understand the value of sitting on the outside of the industry table. And so whenever we have a partnership, or we're starting to talk about one, I make sure that those stakeholders are there to hear that, because I've had a few of them come up and say, I have never heard that before. I've never heard industry say that before, and I've had so many conversations, and we built this program. And so I think that just on that grassroots level, trying to bring them together at the same time, so we're all moving the same direction, that's really what we're trying to do right now.
And to throw out too, when we bring this group together, you have, this is different too, you have community colleges, universities, and K-12 all sitting together, talking about how do we get better transfer for our community college students to go into engineering programs at the university level, or how do we get real hands-on experience in manufacturing for those mechanical engineers that CSU is putting out that have all theory and no hands-on experience. And so combining those educational groups really makes a difference. All right, so jump in, whoever wants to answer this one. Who or what is the key driver? How does a point person come about? So how do you get to that industry champion that you're talking about? How do you figure out who that is?
That was pretty easy for us in Gardner, because I have, we kind of play the long game. I kind of figured out in the last few months, I probably spend about 25% of my time on relationship development and management, because that, really strong connected relationship is the key to when any other opportunity arises, having folks trust me. So like when I bring some wild idea like next gen sector partnerships, they show up and listen and get excited. So it was very kind of clear, because I had committed a lot of my time and effort into that community. But in that meeting, that first meeting where we were kind of talking about, is this something you want to do? Really keenly listening to who was speaking the language that really understood why this was different. Because there's it's in some instances it's drastically different, in others it's just kind of nuance. But in that meeting, one person really stood out, that he understood what this is and why it was different, and we knew that that was going to be, it was a no-brainer that we would ask him to champion it. And of course, we had the relationship, so when we asked, he said yes.
Any other comments about how do you figure that out? Who is that champion?
So it seems like there's two parts. So who is basically I'm gonna just say who's the primary convener, and that is not, so when we launched tech, it was the board. When we launched food and beverage, it was our local Chamber of Commerce for Eugene. And really it's around those relationships. And who has the capacity and the time, and who has the relationships with the industry, and who gets it as well. So it's different. It's not about, well, we'll convene the industry and we'll get all the information and we'll keep all the information to ourselves. It really is about, we're going to convene the industry and we're going to bring this information back to all parties so that we can get things done on behalf of the industry. And then the relationship usually develops that champion as well. You see a champion, you have a champion who believes in the work that you're doing and gets it as well from the industry. And that's who brings the rest of the industry along.
How do you engage this group and your local employers with your decision makers, your national decision makers? Does that happen in any of your?
Well, first of all, they're businesses.
They're not employers, they're businesses.
Right.
Just, again, nuance, as you kind of like embrace this model. For us, I worked hard to have a county commissioner, and we have a county commissioner that lives in the community where we have a partnership. And he is really good. He comes to most of the meetings, and is actually, we've invited a couple of our state legislators in to kind of just track these conversations so it can percolate up. I can do that, however, it has a lot more weight behind it when it's from those elected officials. And then we've had a couple instances kind of on the fringes of this partnership, folks who were kind of maybe involved, who through it have created relationships where they're now taking those folks to Helena, to the state capitol, to connect in with state. And I don't know if we really have gone beyond to the federal level yet, but I'm not sure if that answered that.
Yep. How often do your sector partnerships meet?
So it's not about meeting for the sake of meeting, I'll say that. So we have steering committees, boards that oversee each one of our strategists is what we have named them. And it's a model that's worked where the industry comes together to verify and validate the work that the community is working on the industry's behalf. Typically, in the beginning, those can be monthly meetings. As time goes on, those are more likely quarterly meetings. And then we also have quarterly meetings of what we call our Lane County Sector Strategy Team. So that's all of the board, the economic development, the chambers, the cities coming together to reiterate and listen and hear and ask questions about what it is that the industry has asked for, and are we all still on the same page, and checking in with one another to make sure that we're all hearing the same information. There could be multiple other work groups, task forces, depending on what the initiative is that's being worked on. In education, there's a number of different groups that work together and then come back to the full committee to engage them in the things that they've put together as well. So it's a constant, but it really is around the topic, what you're working on, and that's what drives the work. Not just that we're having a meeting because we're supposed to have meetings, but really we're getting things done. Meagan's directing me to talk. Garner doesn't meet in the summer. As you know, it's just kind of wild and crazy. So they meet October through May. This was just their first full kind of year of meeting that we just wrapped up at our last meeting a week ago. Right now they're meeting monthly for about an hour and a half. Sometimes a social is tacked onto that, and sometimes it's hard to get people to leave. So we'll kind of do the business and they may stay 2 or 3 hours.
And they're really committed to good food and good beverages, which is I think is really smart, because there's all those like wins and connections that are happening that I don't even know about, because they're the subtle social relationship-based ones that kind of come out of that social open time.
Around meetings, a couple things I would point out too. That networking time is really important to build in. And sometimes you forget about that. I always do, because I'm, all right, stay on task. But be sure to build in before and after networking time. And the other story I'll tell is our NOCO manufacturing group. The first time they met after the launch, the public partner folks who convened it said, well, we think we'll get back together in 2 months. And those guys looked at us like we were crazy. 2 months? Do you know what happens in 2 months? They were ready to get back together in 2 weeks. They wanted to see action, and they wanted to see it fast. So I think the meeting that you have directly following your launch is really important and needs to happen quickly. All right, what's your biggest surprise from working with sector partnerships from each of you?
Well, I think I already talked about my aha moments, but with everyone here together, I think, I want to piggyback on the networking comment. I come from a large state as well, and many times we are brought together like you are, and there are people who sit up here and talk to you, and you don't often get the time to talk to each other. And I think that's why there is a networking event tonight as well. And I want to encourage people not to just go away, because you've driven here from all across the state, and there is a wealth of knowledge in this room. You're doing a lot of the same work, and you're doing it in different parts of the state. And one of the things that I feel like I miss out on when we're brought together as a state is just talking to my peers from across the state, talking to them about what their issues are, what their struggles are, what they are championing, what things that they see that are happening in their area and how they make that happen. I think it's great, I'm here and I enjoy sharing what we did in our state. I also see some similarities though about how we can all be brought together. We spend days together in a room, and then we don't really know what's going on in other counties and other places in our state, because it's so big. So please take advantage of the time that you have together when you have some time to network and talk to one another, because I think there is a wealth of knowledge in this room, and I think that you actually will find that you have a lot to learn from each other as well.
My biggest surprise, I have a surprise every time I watch a launch or watch a group of industry get together. I like to refer to it as a barn raising, because I feel like in the time that we're in right now and moving so quickly, that when you get these folks together that are entrepreneurs anyway and build their business, they're building their own system, and I always feel pretty lucky that I get to be a part of that and support that. And before you know it, the barn's raised, and everybody picked up a hammer and chipped in. And I've had conversations with John before, like, do you ever get sick of this? And obviously they don't. I mean, Lindsay and John really never get tired of this, and to me, that it just keeps it going. Like, right when you feel like you can't deal with anybody duplicating your work or doing something that you wouldn't have done that way, and you had a better idea, you get in this room and you just get to sit and listen, and it always blows my mind. Like, I never would have thought of that. It's cool.
Mine are very similar to kind of what Meagan said. I might say it a little different. It's just so surprising that we go along and we're not tapping into that collective intelligence and power and connections and network that industry has. We're leaving a ton on the table if we're not doing this. And it's just kind of silly once you get past it and you look back, and I was like, oh wow, like, did I really think I was gonna be the one that comes up with the best idea around this? So it's really just creating that space and empowering industry to share and come up with the ideas and the solutions. And the other really surprising things is they don't have to be complicated. This doesn't have to be a lot of work. The big win from the Gardner Tourism Partnership of this year was Xanterra gets about 10,000 applications a year, and after they get about through 3,000 or 4,000 of them, they have filled all of their positions. And there are people in the community clamoring for applicants. And their simple solution is the chamber now has a jobs page, and they update it every week. And Xanterra and a couple of the other large employers now have email language on what they deem as quality applicants, someone that they would consider. They redirect them to that jobs page. They set up that infrastructure in like a day and a half. It was a really simple solution. We're evaluating whether it's, really successful solution. We don't know that yet, but just be prepared that some of the things that come out of it can be really simple and easy. It doesn't have to be real complicated. Are we revealing ourselves under the table here? Woo, did we pass that test?
Oh, thank you. Just one more thing I would say.
I just want to add, one of the things as I reflected on this work, all of us were brought up in an education model that, maybe more so now, but we all studied for the test. And when you took the test, it was eyes on your own paper, heads down, and the responsibility and the keeper of the knowledge was all on you. The only way to get through K through 12 and to get on the college and to get through college was to depend on just yourself. It is ingrained in us. We all have this huge burden that we have to have all the answers, all by ourselves. Every single test we've ever taken in life taught us that. The great thing about Next Gen is that you get to cheat on this test. You get to work with others, you get to look to others and solve the problem together. It's not about being by yourself and having all the answers.
I have a great example for that. One of our big surprises was in CTE, how many of you get pounded on all the time to try and get non-traditional students to try non-traditional careers? We're always trying to think how to do that. And we held our get into the guts of healthcare careers, and we have middle schoolers come and look at different career opportunities. And then we have lots of opportunities to have students talk with people in those careers. And Columbine Health Systems sends a male nurse. What do you know? All this time we keep trying to think of ways to do that, and they send an unbelievably wonderful male nurse to talk to the boys about nursing. So again, back to, there's all kinds of ways to solve these issues, and we can't do it by ourselves. Thanks to our panel.